But I think now people have understood and we are moving in the right direction with smart cities. The curse that we cannot avoid. I was born in Mumbai. साइकिलिंग इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे काम करूंगा, लोग क्यों साइकिल कर पाए इस पे काम करूंगा. One might say मतलब क्या, how do we do? Do we all walk together? Maybe yes. जिससे मुझे वोट मिलने वाला है, अगर वो ही मुझसे खफा है तो मुझे ऐसा काम शायद नहीं करना चाहिए. But because BRT is also cheap, it was easier to dismantle it.
Have you had such experiences that made you feel like, अरे ये तो चल गया?
Auto rickshaws encroach our footpath. That means there is a need of auto rickshaw standing. If you provide for it, they will not be on your footpath, they will be in their stand. But because you do not provide for them, they are finding their own way to live around. I would like that Thanos click with me to make everyone understand the need of sustainability and sustainable transport.
नमस्ते दोस्तों, कैसे हैं आप सब? आज हम आ गए हैं फिर से एक इंस्पायरिंग स्टोरी लेकर आपके सामने. आपको पता ही होगा कि आजकल इंडिया में और पूरी ही दुनिया में ट्रांसपोर्टेशन की बड़ी ही समस्या है. ट्रैफिक जैम्स, एयर पोल्यूशन, एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा. पर ऐसे भी लोग हैं, ऐसे भी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं जो हमारी ट्रांसपोर्ट सिस्टम को सस्टेनेबल बनाने के लिए काम करते हैं. आज की हमारी कहानी है ऐसे ही एक वॉरियर की, एक ऐसे इंसान की जो हमारी सिटीज को अच्छे से अच्छा ट्रांसपोर्ट कैसे मिल सकता है उस पे काम करते हैं. उनका नाम है चेतन सोदाय. चेतन एक आर्किटेक्ट है, ओपन डिजाइनर है, रिसर्चर है और सस्टेनेबल ट्रांसपोर्टेशन के लिए बेंगलुरु में काम करते हैं. चलिए जानते हैं चेतन की कहानी उनकी जुबानी. Hello Chetan, how are you?
Hi Rashmita, I'm very happy to be here. Very good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for doing this episode with us, and we think that your story needs to be told to our audience.
Thank you for inviting me.
But let me first ask you, तो आपके हिसाब से एक स्मार्ट सिटी क्या होता है?
Smart city, like the way it is talked about, there are many definitions. लेकिन मेरा खुद का opinion of smart city is it has to be sustainable, it has to be very proactive. People should find their needs and their necessities in walkable distances in their neighborhoods. And जब उसके साथ कोई technology mix हो जाए, so that's something which is smart. Like I want to buy a mango, this mango season, right? And if I can use a UPI app to pay for that, I'll walk down, take them, come home, I'll eat them very peacefully with family. I think that's smart. If we can't do that, then maybe we are struggling with our existential crisis is now talking towards smart. Sadly, in India, smart cities started at a different note, but I think now people have understood and we are moving in the right direction with smart cities. Yeah, that's a smart city for me.
Okay. In your answer, you mentioned sustainability.
Yeah.
And sustainable transport is something जिसके बारे में हम आपसे बात करना चाहते हैं. तो sustainable transport क्या होता है चेतन? In context of India, जहाँ पे इतनी population है, इतना traffic congestion है, इसमें आप sustainability की बात करते हो, तो वो क्या होता है exactly?
तो इसके लिए I would like to start with a principle, छोटा सा. So सस्टेनेबिलिटी इन रियल सेंस जो हम बोलते हैं वो होता है 3 R's की बात करते हैं. रिड्यूस, रीयूज, रिसाइकल. रिड्यूस एनीथिंग दैट यू डोंट नीड टू बाय टू लिव ऑन, like having 100 pairs of shoes doesn't really make sense if you're going to wear just 2 on regular basis. So it's all about regular basis. तो रेगुलर बेसिस पे हम कितनी चीज़ें इस्तेमाल करते हैं, क्या वो रिड्यूस हो सकती है, क्या वो रीयूज हो सकती है. जैसे अगर आई थिंक सम ऑफ द एक्ट्रेसेस वाज इन न्यूज़ सेइंग कि हमने शादी का जोड़ा वापस यूज़ किया, राइट, it for some other purpose or stitching it into small bags or whatever, that's reuse. So that's a very good purpose. Like a lot of our clothes, like at least our generation, what hands down clothes, मतलब बड़े भैया का या पापा का clothes और माँ का बड़ी बहन का clothes were handed down to us. That is a good reuse of things. Until they were torn and again used for cleaning our houses, till that extent it was reuse. And then the final stage of recycle, like plastics to a very large extent, we assume that they are good and possibly recyclable, but not every plastic is actually reaching recycling. So first is reduce. If you can reduce plastic use, something very similar happens with public transport or transport overall. Transport is more about what? I want to go somewhere if something or me myself can go there without a lot of effort. That is, so effort is sustainable. Like the lesser the effort, like if I assume I want to take a two-wheeler and go somewhere, that's not sustainable because firstly, then every one or maximum two individual will have to use that vehicle whenever they're moving out. Second, it uses oil or fuel, which comes after mining so many like kilometers deep into the earth's crust, which is also very limited resource. तो इसको sustainable तब कर सकते हैं on your need basis, जब बहुत ज़्यादा ज़रूरत है, तब शायद मैं मेरी बाइक लेके मेरी वाइफ को या फिर मेरी मॉम को कहीं लेके जाओ और लेके आओ. So that's more sustainable than using it regular basis to go to office income. अगर regularly मैं शायद बस, मेट्रो, कहीं पे शेयर्ड ऑटो या फिर कार पूलिंग ऐसी चीज़ें अगर हम करें तो that is more sustainable. So more number of people come together, aggregate together and go and come. उससे क्या होता है, बहुत सारा fuel consumption कम हो जाता है. That is more sustainable. So sustainable transport is somewhat that. इसके भी 3 principles होते हैं ASI. So first is avoid. जितना डेली बेसिस पे मुझे कहीं जाना अवॉइड कर सकता हूँ मैं, दैट इज ए. एस इज टू शिफ्ट टू अ बेटर मोड ऑफ ट्रांसपोर्ट. अगर मुझे जाना ही पड़ रहा है ऑन डेली बेसिस कहीं पे, तो क्या मैं बस या फिर शेयर्ड ऑटो या फिर मेट्रो या फिर इवन लोकल रेल, जैसे मुंबई हैज अ लोकल रेल और कोलकाता ऑल्सो हैज अ लोकल रेल, क्या उसका इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं. एंड द लास्ट वन इज इनोवेट. सो जिस चीज़ से भी हम जा रहे हैं, क्या उसमें नई टेक्नोलॉजी आ सकती है. जैसे बहुत जगह एटलीस्ट इंडिया इज एग्रीगेटिंग more than 50,000 electric buses, e-buses, जिससे एटलीस्ट शहरों का पोल्यूशन कम होगा. ऑब्वियसली इलेक्ट्रिसिटी जनरेशन का स्पॉट भी सस्टेनेबल होना ज़रूरी है. इन करंट केस वी आर कोल इंड्यूस्ड इलेक्ट्रिसिटी प्रोड्यूसर्स, बट अगर वो नेचुरल या ग्रीनर एनर्जी से बन सकता है देन ओवरऑल शिफ्ट बिकम्स सस्टेनेबल. तो दैट्स द एम. सो हम ASI करके सस्टेनेबल मोबिलिटी में भी वो जो RRR ऑफ सस्टेनेबिलिटी इन लाइफ की बात करते हैं, वही सस्टेनेबल मोबिलिटी में ASI के थ्रू, अवॉइड, शिफ्ट एंड इनोवेट के थ्रू हम सस्टेनेबल ट्रांसपोर्ट की तरफ जा सकते हैं. So that is overall understanding of sustainable transport.
That's very interesting to put it that way because I know the principle of 3R, but ये transportation में भी आपने जिस तरह से समझाया, I think that's also very interesting and something that we need to look into and adopt. But Chetan, मुझे आपकी पर्सनल जर्नी के बारे में पूछना है. You are doing what you are doing, but इसका इंस्पिरेशन कहाँ से मिला? आपको कब ऐसा लगा कि मुझे सस्टेनेबल ट्रांसपोर्टेशन या सिटीज के हमारे ट्रांसपोर्ट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर को बेटर करने के लिए काम करना है?
चलो, इसकी शुरुआत है ना एक कर्ज से हुई. The curse that we cannot avoid. I was born in Mumbai.
Okay.
Now being from metropolitan city, the problem is I faced it every day. But the only problem was मुझे तभी समझ में नहीं आता जब मैं छोटा था. But then for my bachelor's I went to Pune, and at that time I realized like there always used to be this fight between Mumbai Pune. Like in Marathi there are a lot of like local jokes saying like Mumbai Pune. That means the fight between the cities. But what I realized was, what is work-life balance? What is sustainability? What is a good living of life? When I enjoyed Pune from that perspective, because there's lesser population, it's a not first year city. ये सब छोटी छोटी चीजें हिट कर रही थी कहीं ना कहीं, फिर दोस्तों के साथ थोड़े मजाक झगड़े वगैरह. बट देन finally I tried to understand where it all comes from, क्योंकि Pune did not have a good transport at that time when I started my bachelor's. So public transport नहीं था. Then most dependency started on two-wheeler. But there were all people like which were like very enthusiastic cyclists at that time. और उनमें से एक मेरे 2 बैच सीनियर आशिक करके मेरा फ्रेंड था, उसका नाम आशिक जैन है. और उसने उसके थीसिस के लिए बैचलर्स के जस्ट थोड़ा पहले he actually cycled from his office in Delhi, internship के लिए वहाँ था, वहाँ से दिल्ली से पुणे वो साइकिल करते हुआ है. And it became a huge thing, right? And he was my inspiration to try to understand, okay, what was the need कि उसे ये क्यों करना पड़ा. Then I realized, I tried to understand the background of what all happened. And the curse hit me again when I was doing my own thesis. I used to cycle to college and come back almost 8 kilometers uphill and 8 kilometers downhill. And 8 kilometers uphill में मुझे पता चला कि क्योंकि इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर सही नहीं है, मुझे अगर इतनी डिफिकल्टीज हो रही है, I'm doing young age, like what, 18 to 20 kind of age, which is like boiling blood. अगर मैं नहीं कर पा रहा हूँ तो हाउ कैन वी एक्सपेक्ट, ये पॉलिसीज वगैरह सब बात करते हैं कि लोगों ने साइकिल करना चाहिए या जो भी, तो ये क्यों कर पाएंगे. एंड तब वी आर डन वन अर्बन डिजाइन स्टूडियो. सो हमें एक अर्बन डिजाइन स्टूडियो होता है बैचलर्स ऑफ आर्किटेक्चर में, जिसमें मैंने सोचा कि मैं साइकिलिंग इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पे काम करूंगा, लोग क्यों साइकिल कर पाए इस पे काम करूंगा. एंड व्हेन आई स्टार्टेड डूइंग इट, सडनली एंटायर क्लास लुक्ड एट वन साइड एंड आई वाज लुकिंग एट द अदर साइड. I was almost on a threat of everyone suggesting, you might fail, because this is something that Indian cities have never experienced, never done, and we don't think, even my faculties at till the very last moment were saying that we don't think you can really make your project out of this. And I was into it for almost 1.5 years, and I was like, no, this is something that I can do. So during my internship, I went to Kunur, which is a hill station near Ooty, and I was very lucky to be at hill station for my internship, but वहाँ पे I took my cycle, and then I realized कि यहाँ पे तो इतना ज़्यादा ऊंचाई, मतलब क्या बोलते हैं, heights and lows है, but people are cycling even here. Now the need of cycling out there was कि लोग ज़्यादा afford नहीं कर पा रहे थे, because it's only tourism based city. तो वहाँ से learnings मैंने पुणे जैसे city में apply की, जहाँ पे इतने ज़्यादा highs and lows नहीं है. So that means it's much easier to cycle in that route. फिर much easier को भी लोग क्यों नहीं कर रहे हैं, उसके जब चीज़ें मैंने सोची वगैरह वगैरह. So at that time, my principal, luckily I got to work with him after my graduation for 2 years, that is Prasanna Desai, Prasanna Desai Architects. So he supported throughout my thesis, saying कि no, it's a very important topic. People are afraid to touch it because they feel it's not doable, but let's try. And that is how slowly, steadily I moved into this journey of sustainable mobility. If I did not have Ashik as my senior and Prasanna Desai as my principal, I wouldn't have been here doing something like this. I was so lucky that yesterday he had come for a conference and we met again. And then he was happy about, like, I'm still pushing the bar to a certain extent to my generation as well as the lower generations. But yeah, that's where I started.
Like they say, necessity is the mother of invention. So एक सोच लगती है, और जब हम एक सोच पे काम करते हैं, फिर लोग जुड़ते हैं, कारवां बनता है, and we are happy that you're still pursuing and continuing do what you believe in. But मुझे ये जानना है कि how relevant this sustainable transportation in the context of Viksit Bharat, or let's say in today's India, where we are developing left, right, center. Urban centers are getting bigger and bigger. There is a population inflow towards cities. Naturally, the vehicles भी बढ़ेंगे. So how relevant is sustainable transportation according to you?
Yeah, let me come to this through understanding of what is a city, right? City actually बनाई क्यों गई थी? या फिर जब भी cities में, like it started long back, like maybe thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. Even Mohenjo-daro for that time was a city. So ideally, town, city, village, countryside, ये सारे terms क्यों relatable है? तो city comes as a high density, more and more people being together. अब जैसे let's take a very simple example. अगर बहुत सारे लोग एक जगह पे साथ में रह रहे हैं, तो उनके लिए पानी की need is like you have to manage it centrally. You cannot give everyone a permission to go for a well. Then we'll end up in a scenario where there's no groundwater. So then you control that. Same with rivers. We control rivers, manage them, have a dam around them, or whatever. A resource that is agglomerated. वो रिसोर्स भी हमें साथ में लाना पड़ता है. सेम इज विद सस्टेनेबल मोबिलिटी. अगर विलेजेस में अभी भी लोग ट्रैक्टर्स, ट्रक्स या साइकिल्स या उनके पर्सनल व्हीकल्स चला रहे हैं, इट माइट नॉट बी अ ह्यूज प्रॉब्लम टिल द टाइम दैट विलेज बिकम्स अ सिटी. बिकॉज आज अगर वहाँ पे एक गांव में लाइक एनीथिंग दैट इज लोअर देन पॉपुलेशन ऑफ 50,000 इज यूजुअली अ विलेज इन आवर सिनेरियो. Cities में 50,000 का, we are talking about 1 crore to 2 crores to 3 crore people staying together. Now imagine all these, let's consider the lowest number, 1 crore people taking out their two-wheeler every day and going on our roads. Will they reach their destination? They can't. And we cannot have so many wide roads because then it becomes unsafe because the speeds increase and there are many, many repercussions. And even if we make them wide, 1 crore two-wheelers on road at any given point will require 90% of the city to be streets, which we cannot afford. Like golden standard that we assume that streets should have roads is 10 to 15%. But if we want so many people to move, how can we move them in those 10 to 15% of arterial networks? We cannot really do that. Hence, a more agglomerated, मतलब साथ में जोड़ी जाके travel करना जरूरी है. अब one might say, मतलब क्या? How do we do? Do we all walk together? Maybe yes. In Mumbai, people walk a lot. Like the average span of walking in Mumbai is between 2 to 5 kilometers. No one walks that globally. इतना कोई नहीं चलता. लेकिन मुंबई की जरूरत हो गई है to walk. And walk is the most sustainable mode of transport. But then, again the problem, agar it's long distance and it's hot as it is currently, one cannot really walk for that much distance. Then what? Then maybe one can cycle. So we say 0 to 1 kilometer max, one can walk, but 1 to 5 kilometers, one can easily cycle. 5 to 10 kilometers, one can use a bus. And if it's beyond 10 kilometers, then high capacity transit like metro, suburban rail, and all of that comes in place. So there's always a mode of transport that you can choose based on how much distance you have to go. अगर मुझे daily basis पे 10 kilometers के ऊपर travel करना है, अगर वहीं मैं 2-wheeler लेके जाऊँ, तो there's frustration to add, there's pollution that I am adding on to, and there is also space that I'm taking away from the street because I'm using it. अगर उसी जगह अगर मैं बस में जाता हूँ, तो मेरे जैसे और 70 लोग उसी बस में ट्रैवल कर सकते हैं। अब वो अलग बात है कि बस को शायद फिर एसी होना चाहिए था। अगर वो एसी होती तो इतने 70 लोग साथ में हो तो ज़्यादा गर्म नहीं होगा, एवरीवन विल बी कंफर्टेबल एंड एटलीस्ट 50 to 55 लोग बैठे होंगे, दे आर मोर कंफर्टेबल इन लॉन्ग जर्नी। फिर उम्र का भी प्रॉब्लम कम हो जाता है, छोटे बच्चे हो या बहुत बूढ़े हो वो भी उसमें बैठ के जा सकते हैं। जैसे मेट्रो, अब बहुत सिटीज़ में इंडिया में मेट्रो आना चालू हो गया है, बट इफ़ इट इज़ नॉट और अंडर यूटिलाइज्ड देन इट्स अ ह्यूज एक्सपेंडिचर जो हमने किया है एंड इट्स गोइंग टू वेस्ट because people are not using it. But there are other problems of reaching that. But doing this will only make people move around in a city, because in a city it's very vibrant. Everyone needs to go from one corner of the city to other corner of the city. But if everyone takes their personal mode of transport, everything is going to be blocked or clogged to an extent when we call it a congestion. Like I think top 2 cities of global congestion are in India, that is Bangalore and Mumbai. Even Delhi too, large extent. But when we say they are clogged means what? Means we're not using our public transport better as we could. Because the problem is, abhi bhi even Bangalore and many other cities don't have very good robust network of public transport. लेकिन जब तक वो बनता नहीं, there are other ways. Maybe moving forward we'll have that conversation also. But for now, it's highly relevant to answer your question that if it's not in cities, then nowhere else is sustainable transport relevant. It's the cities that are just highly motivated to have, and not just first tier cities. Second tier cities are more like important in this scenario, because cities like Bangalore, Delhi, Mumbai, Chennai, it will be difficult to have this conversation because people are already used to a particular mode of transport. But cities like Pune, Jaipur, maybe even Bangalore, Udaipur, maybe Lucknow, all these cities still have the capacity to become tier 1, but also improve their sustainable transport by the time they become tier 1. And that is where we should start.
When you were explaining all this, मेरे दिमाग में बहुत सारे ख्याल आए कि first of all, yes, I agree कि Bangalore, I've heard more about Bangalore than that of Mumbai, because I've only been to Bangalore once. I've been to Mumbai more frequently because of work. Mumbai is such a city, or it has been developed in such a way that it's walkable as well as it is approachable. I mean, Bombay का हर एक कोना approachable है with public transportation. और जो last जो तुम्हारा stretch होता है, you can do it with auto rickshaw or shared auto rickshaw, like you said. So, what would you say? What is the problem, or where is the resistance कि हम अभी तक, despite the fact that there are benefits of public transportation, people are not still adopting that way of life?
I would like to come back to the ASI for this. So, avoid, shift and innovate. So, अभी भी इंडिया में जब public transport की तरफ देखा जाता है, it's looked at from the perspective of I, that is innovate. So, buses आई, buses गई, नए buses आई, newer technology की buses आई, AC buses आई, EV buses आई. But then we are forgetting the fact that we have to start with A and S and then do I. So the S and R, you're talking about that component, the shift. So shift is not happening for people to move from public transport, personal transport to public transport. And there's a simple reason for that. Any human by nature will choose anything that is more convenient, right? So there is an obesity problem in US, and the study showcased that it is all related because when people are walking from their offices, now they're walking. Luckily, at least the city is experiencing that. But when they're walking from office to metro and then metro or subway, they call it, from subway to their homes, all the shops there actually have only and only options of fast food and no options of fresh food. So now you see, what is available is what you use, or what is more convenient, you use it more. In Indian cities for last at least 3 to 4 decades, we have been aspirational, which is a good thing. That is what got our GDP to this level. But being aspirational also got its rootings from some American ways of lifestyle. When America, now back, almost 60 years back, boasted about American way of life, which was having your own bungalow, having your own car, and sitting in that car going peacefully to your office or wherever you're going. Now that aspiration also was so heavily advertised even in India by the ministry, by the automobile industry, also by people who really wanted to see that once we are starting to earn a bit, because India now is slowly moving towards earning better. We are third to fourth biggest GDP of the global economy. You see, look at that. The aspirations have again come back, and that is where the need to use public transport feels in a way unnecessary. And this problem arose because India saw a growth of vehicular increase or exponential growth in last 10 years, which was never expected in India, because every other country globally, the growth was twofolds or threefolds. We had growth like city like Bangalore has 10-fold growth in vehicle population. Now, if you look at it as a scale, right, we were saying like one double in Bangalore, it went just like that. That curve itself showcases that we were never ready for this kind of transportation to come in. And now, even if there is an American dream of India, that I call it now, because it's influenced from America, even if we get our car out, we're stuck. And that is what makes us go revisit this thought. And a lot of policies, so everyone talks about these policies and things that how we can change. They have been in place, but the problem is, I as an end user, including me, myself, would never want a politician to tell me that, why don't you take a bus? When I know I can afford a car and I can take it every day. Well, that is where the shift needs to happen. This is what got us to shift in global scenarios as well. Like Amsterdam, Netherlands for that matter, they raised a huge uproar against the government, saying you're making us force to use private transport because the planning is not that well. In Indian scenarios, it's the same scenario. If you have to really go somewhere, in city like Bangalore, I'm not comparing Mumbai at the moment because it's a very different geography, and I'll come to that also. Bangalore is a radial city. So if you have to make public transport reach every nook and corner of the city, you will need at least 10 folds of the probable buses and metro networks that Mumbai might require, because Mumbai is a vertical city. It's a V-shaped city. So all lines are vertical. So you move north and south. In the wider section, you move east and west. In Bangalore, because it's a radial city, you have to do that horizontal, which Mumbai does only at one section throughout the city, which is very difficult for last mile that you mentioned, right? Reaching to the public transport. That's something called as first mile and last mile. So that is very difficult in Indian scenario, but people are still doing it. There are surveys done by WRI also where I work recently in multiple cities, out of which 7,000 surveys mentioned that most of the people walked to around 3 to 4 kilometers to reach their last mile to a public transport. Walking or cycling or taking auto for 3 kilometers is huge, because in our cities, usually our destinations are within 5 kilometers. So I have to go somewhere for 5 kilometers. If at 3 kilometers, I'm just doing last mile. I rather directly go to the destination than using the 2 kilometers of public transport. And that is what is failing in Indian scenarios at the moment. But yeah, cities are doing a lot of efforts to move away from that conversation, but till the time we make it really convenient for the end user to use it. Like, why are we using mobile phones so often compared to our laptops? Because that has made our lives more convenient. So it's not that advent of mobile has changed how we use our systems. It just made it more convenient. Till the time there were no smartphones, everyone would be stuck to their laptops for doing work. But now with smartphones and web, we are moving towards it. So yeah, the last part, innovation. So innovation is what might bridge the gap between this aspiration towards personal transport versus public transport. If tomorrow you have to go in the sun in your two-wheeler to office, which takes you maybe 2 hours, and if the same option is given you in AC in a bus or a metro, why wouldn't you choose that? And it's much cheaper compared to what your two-wheeler might cost you. So it's not that people don't want it. People want it, but just that currently there are not so many good options. Like city like Ahmedabad, they're using their BRTS bus system much better compared to any other city for that matter. But yeah, so that's the gap.
Right. Thank you for mentioning Ahmedabad. Since I am an Ahmedabadi, yes, we take proud in our bus rapid transit system, BRTS, which is running very successfully and it is loved by everybody. I would like to mention कि जब BRT शुरू हुई थी तो लोग उसको यूज करें, एंड यूजर उसको यूज करें उसके बेनिफिट दिखाने के लिए. आई थिंक द कॉर्पोरेशन और द गवर्नमेंट मेड इट फ्री फॉर अबाउट 6 months. उनको आदत पड़ गई, लोगों को आदत डाली, एंड देन people saw the benefit of it. And I think a lot of people, even me, if I am getting down at Maninagar railway station or Kalupur railway station to cross the old city and the river and come to the other side of the city, I would definitely use the BRTS, because I don't have to change any station. It's just one single road. And that's something I think Ahmedabad और गुजरात government did very well. But having said that, चेतन हमें ये भी पता है कि ये BRTS system जो है कुछ cities में फेल गई है. जहाँ तक मुझे पता है पुणे में फेल गई है और आई थिंक इवन इन दिल्ली की जो ब्लू बसेस जो बोलते थे दैट सिस्टम ऑल्सो फेल ड्रास्टिकली. सो अभी तक हमने ये डिस्कस किया कि हमें क्या करना चाहिए, बट एंड यू ऑल्सो शोड वेज हाउ वी कैन इम्प्लीमेंट दिस मेजर्स सच दैट it goes to the end user and it's largely acceptable by the Indian urban population. But I would also like to know the failures and why the failures happen and how to overcome all these failures. उसमें policies का क्या part होता है या फिर infrastructure development का कितना part होता है. I would also like you to sort of take us through that point.
Right. Let's use the example of BRTS itself. So, बहुत लोगों को शायद BRTS पता भी ना हो. So, BRTS is a way जहाँ पे you segregate, like there's a road maybe of 6 lanes, 3 lanes एक तरफ, 3 lanes दूसरी तरफ, जिसपे central के 2 lanes are taken away from traffic and यहाँ पे buses चल दिया. Now, because it's segregated, अब बस को ट्रैफिक पे रोकने की जरूरत नहीं होती है. So it goes much faster, almost equivalent to a suburban rail या फिर metro that moves very fast through that corridor. And it stops at every important location where usual bus stops are. But these bus stops are centrally located. Now, यहाँ से problem शुरू होती है. So, when we improve our infrastructure, the planning of that has to start way before. Like what Ahmedabad did. It made it available for 6 months for free for people to understand. Firstly, because this is very new. Like people never used to get down of right-hand side of the bus, but always from the left-hand side of the bus. To change that, to make them aware of, okay, what that is. And that people might assume कि मैं रास्ते के सेंटर में उतर गया. अब ये दोनों तरफ रास्ता क्रॉस करना है, which was not the earlier case of scenario. क्योंकि हम फुटपाथ से बस में चढ़ते थे. But then, if one time you're getting into the bus from footpath side, the other time you have to get on the other side of the footpath. And then you have to cross 2x of the distance. If 1x is एक side का carriageway, so you avoided that. But while coming back, you have to cross 2x. Center में आके फिर यहाँ पे. So BRT does exactly the same, but the only conflict it creates is every time you have to get to the bus, you have to cross the road. And every time you leave the bus, you have to cross the road. But that's only half x. You don't have to complete entire 2x distance. But still, this kind of understanding was not really spread across when they implemented in Pune and Delhi. So now people are not really understanding what it is. The only feeling, because it was not communicated. So communication is very important when you bring new system to a city. Like जब metro आती है किसी भी शहर में, there's so many measures that are taken to use that metro. आप कैसे ऊपर जाओगे, टिकट किस तरीके से लोगे, फिर वो कॉइन डालना है, स्कैन करना है, जो भी करना है. Then you reach the platform. From the platform, so you can access only one side. You cannot access the other side, so you have to again go back down if you're gone in the wrong place or what. All that, right? इस सारा training mandatory होता है when the metro comes in. This did not happen at a very large extent in both of these cities, Pune as well as in Delhi. And also another reason was Pune and Delhi were also very highly car and two-wheeler oriented at the time when these measures were implemented. So जब ये सड़क का एक हिस्सा निकाला गया, people, because they were not aware what exactly this is, people fought back extensively against it. So it was the people themselves, the end user, who fought against it. And then political will immediately छू हो गया. Means what? जिससे मुझे वोट मिलने वाला है, अगर वो ही मुझसे खफा है, तो मुझे ऐसा काम शायद नहीं करना चाहिए. And this loss of political will changed the entire spectrum of how people look towards BRT. तो उसकी implementation अच्छे से नहीं हुई, उसकी last mile connectivity अच्छे से नहीं हुई, नेटवर्क्स वही डेवलप हुए जहाँ चौड़े रास्ते थे, रादर देन जहाँ नीड थी पब्लिक ट्रांसपोर्ट की. तो जहाँ सिर्फ चौड़े रास्ते थे वहीं पे सिर्फ इम्प्लीमेंट करने के कारण there were no people to use that. So everyone saw that no one using the buses. But then it was implemented in the place where it was maybe not necessary at that time. This case of Delhi. In case of Pune, they started with a hybrid mode of BRT, wherein you get into bus only from the left-hand side. It was not at the board like how Ahmedabad already had it, right? It will be at the level of the thing. And ये क्यों किया गया? क्योंकि at that time, Pune did not have buses that can run into a BRT system which is boarding from the right-hand side. So जब वो नहीं था, you shouldn't have brought the infrastructure in place, which made it difficult. But at that time, there was a lot of push and there was availability of funds to execute it. They executed it. And within a few years, they had the newer buses, which had now the ecosystem to allow to open on the right-hand side. Now, there were two types of stops. One where people can go forward like that and one where people could go down like that. And now again, the confusion started. like which stations come on this side, which stations come on that side. And all of that again led to a lot of confusion and no good political will around executing projects like these. अब जैसे अगर हम मेट्रो बनाते कल जाके ऐसे तो नहीं बोल सकते ना कि यार ये इस तरफ से चढ़ने के लिए मुश्किल हो रहा है इससे मेट्रो बंद करते हैं, क्योंकि उसमें उतने ज़्यादा हज़ारों करोड़ हमने इन्वेस्ट किए. बट बिकॉज BRT is also cheap, it was easier to dismantle it than saying that we will still put in more money to make it more understandable for people to use it. So it was not a flaw of the infrastructure, but a flaw of the operation mechanism around it that made it all, in a way, unsuccessful models of implementation. Actually, BRT in Delhi was successful to an extent where the routes where earlier buses were running and where BRT came in, the BRT had more occupancy and more faster connectivity. But because it was compared to metro's compatibility, it never worked out. Because then metro was a very successful model. Still, metro ridership of Delhi is lesser than what it was expected for. But because it was compared to that, it felt like BRT was not really operational. And people were anyways fighting for road space, which people are fighting everywhere, right? Even in Ahmedabad, actually, after being so successful, the network has not increased than the trunk 3 or 4 lines. It has not increased throughout the city of like maybe at least 20 routes of BRT. It didn't happen. But metro is happening. So these are some,
Yes, I was just going to say that.
yeah, but metro is happening. So this is the fight of coming in and out of infrastructure. So the
True.
plan. So when we say ASI, the shift and avoid also focuses very heavily on planning principles and economic instruments around it. If there are good economical instruments put in place, like you tax vehicle usage, you make it more difficult or more inconvenient for using personal mode of transport, people will automatically use public mode of transport. And sadly, if BRT did not work out in Indian scenario, at least in some cities, but a few cities have been really good examples of BRT. Like Hubli Dharwad of Karnataka has been a very good example after Ahmedabad of BRT, wherein the buses were not at all working there. And now with BRT, suddenly 200% increasing usage of buses has started, which are not even BRT buses. So because people got used to using a bus, so BRT made them aware of what is the benefit of a bus. And it's much cheaper. So yeah, that's one of the problems of how infrastructure might fail if they're not planned really well. And communication is the key. If you don't communicate with your end user, like advertisements, right? You're buying Coca-Cola because it's advertised heavily. If you don't really advertise your public systems, also something like that, or at least much better communication, then you might see infrastructure fail.
Right. So you talked about the end user communication. तो एक डिजाइनर्स होते हैं, then there are these other stakeholders जो implementation में लाते हैं, which is corporation and then the government. I would like to ask you, since you work on grassroots level, we've seen your work to an extent that you go out there in public. There are interactions that WRI India in Bangalore does with people. There are surveys that are being done, and you yourself in your personal life, we'll come to that a little later, but you go out there in public and communicate with people the benefits of the plan or their requirement, which is actually a very important part of a design process when we do city level designs, right? Because our client is the city, is the people that are living in the city. So I would like to know, what is that like? How do you do that? Because I have seen in my professional career that not many urban designers or city planners really go out there and do conversation with the people. They are mainly sitting in the offices, preparing reports in the favor of the stakeholders. How do they generate revenue? Not really thinking about the end user, but you are doing that. WRI does that. Can you tell us how does that process work and what are the benefits? Have you had certain experiences that made you feel like, "Arey, ye to chal gaya"?
Yeah, so I'll take an example in Pune when I was working with Prasanna Desai Architects at that time, because that is what actually put a lot of conversations again onto the table. And then obviously WRI, we are doing it extensively, unquestionably. But that is one example where I was also very young and trying to understand, okay, how this all works. And you're right, architects, urban designers, urban planners, transportation engineers, transportation planners, they work from offices desks because they need to do it, which is fine, which is their core job, their core competency. But then there is this communication, which is heavily important, because it's like you go and buy a new fruit to eat at home, but no one at home knows how to utilize it. You wait for a few days and now it goes spoiled and you have to throw it, right? So if you don't know what it is, how it's to be made, then you can't really relish the idea of what the project or that particular scheme got you. And that is where interaction is very important. Like one of the examples that I'm talking about is a street design. That was for the first time under smart cities, thanks to Kunal Kumar at that time, who had this vision that, okay, maybe let's do street design under smart city, which was never the aim. Okay, and then suddenly this project happened, and globally it was a news, and India-wide people thought, oh, we can use smart cities also to do streets. And now we see almost 70% of all the projects in smart cities have been streets. And this all started with that one project that we did in Pune, wherein everyone wanted something very flamboyant, right? We have a designer on board, let's make something very flamboyant. Na bada badhiya kuch to kar de. We did that. And we were 100% sure that it won't happen this way because people will fight back. So there's an equilibrium in society. If you do something very extreme, at least people or politicians or administrative bodies will put you back to square one, because you have to realize everything has to be in balance. And that is where conversation becomes really important. So we fought our battles with the city corporation, engineers, administrators, politicians to say, like, this is too extreme. We should not directly pedestrianize a street, which everyone is used to using two-wheelers or four-wheelers or any like motorized vehicles. And they said, no, let's do, but it has to be successful also. And we were like, okay, now you want us to do something. And now if you also want it to be successful, we said, okay, let's have a public meeting. Let's showcase all of this, explain them the benefits of it. And we kept no doubts in ourselves and sold that entire project as if it is the only best thing that ever happened in the city. And as we expected, people fought back, which is good, because then you realize they have ownership over something that they've been using for so long, which is a very good thing. Internationally, we see when such projects come in, people don't fight back, people don't interact, and the project comes in place, but people are not out there enjoying that space. But in this case, people fought tooth and nail, like to an extent where people said, like, there's a child shop somewhere there for buying some toys and something. And that guy fought us saying, like, you want me or my child to walk there, he's only 2 years of age, to walk there and go and come half a kilometer. How risky would that be? And now the same person is using the same street, takes the kid on walk to go there and play on a very small, we made this up city. So snakes and ladder or street, they play there also. And now he enjoys the spectrum of that. But this conversation allowed us to do that. So we got a huge backlash. We talked to people and we realized they want only 1 or 2 lanes up and down, but everything else could be made into a plaza or something. And that changed the perspective of the entire project. And now the project is also people's project. It's not just an urban designer's project. But at that time, it was not just us, the urban designers and planners, who were actually doing it. But we also got together 2 other firms. One is ITDB at that time, who used to help and support on all the research components at that time. And also CE, which is Sanskriti Menon specifically, because they have a lot of social scientists with them who know how to talk to people, how to get their opinions out. Like tomorrow, if I go and ask anyone, do you want a good footpath over here? People will say yes, but what exactly in that they might not know. But how to get that out from people is an experience in itself. And that is what we learned through engagement. You cannot do urban projects individually. And that is what brings me to, again, answering your question. It was because of CE and ITDP and we working together with the city corporation and people around that allowed such a program or even such a street development for the first time in the city to take place. Or else people would have fought back after implementation and there was loss of ownership that would have happened. But because they fought for implementation, we arranged or improved our proposals to match their expectations. Now that it is a successful model. And now that has spread to almost 8 kilometers around everywhere. But that first, I think 50 meters was a test that we did. And that changed everything. And that 50 meters, we also did a trial. We put up a trial saying for 7 days of the week, we are going to close this road. I'm going to do some tactical projects like some painting. People can come, like how happy streets happen, right? Something like that for 7 days throughout, morning to evening, during peak hours, all the through. Happy streets happens what? Early in the morning where there are usually no cars. But this happened in the peak hours, during time and throughout all the 7 days. And then people got the taste of, okay, this is what I want. I want to come out on my streets. I want to play maybe badminton over there. I want to maybe enjoy sitting under the tree. People with wheelchairs also came out and walked on these spaces under the tree shade and everything. And this is what we wanted to showcase to the government for them to also see. It's not only concentrated on one side with the people, which is bottom up, but also top down. You have talked to showcase it to also commissioners of the city, engineers of the city who actually do these works, to make them also realize this is also your project and we're doing your work, but you also have to talk to someone who's going to use it on daily basis. And that is where you bring equilibrium in the conversation. And hence, conversations are important.
How lovely. Okay, when you were talking about footpath, etc., I just had one realization that came to my mind when I compared Ahmedabad BRTS route. I remember all the roads were first developed or designed and constructed so that there were these 3 lanes, a BRTS corridor, 3 lanes, then bicycle paths, and then footpath. But one failure I saw in Ahmedabad is that the bicycle paths were so narrow. I think for bicycle, one way you require about 90 to 1.2 meters and road, and then this was barely 60 to 70. Moreover, the footpaths were encroached upon by the slum dwellers. So I see these issues. I hope it is not so much of a problem, because this is what I'm talking about 10 years ago. But do you face such issues, and are there any ways to tackle such problems of encroachment, and then planners themselves not going to the last point to do that little detailing of road width, right? It's not much.
So actually, this is not problem of design or execution. This is problem of study. So in academics, how we do, right? We cannot directly jump to 2 into 2, but you have to start learning 2 plus 2 to minus 2, all of those. Similar way, you cannot jump in and bring in very huge infrastructural project into a city without knowing what its capacity is. City ready for that? And then even if it's ready and it's put in place, will be end users use it, right? So like heavy projects like BRT at that time, like luckily now newer projects like Metro are much better in this kind of study, where it was not back then when BRT started, like almost 2010 to 12 is the time we're talking about. At that time, mega infrastructure projects for public transport were very new in Indian context. So what happened was, there was a mandate, and this came as a global mandate, like adopting from global understandings, that there's a funding that's going to come from the center, and we have to do a central BRT, which will have cycle tracks and footpaths on the side. But this was given to engineers to implement, who never understood first what is BRT, why should people use it. Secondly, if there's a BRT, why do we need footpaths? And then what is beyond that footpath was never studied also. Like to a large extent, a lot of BRT stations which were identified previously were based on high footfall destinations. Like you might see all these stations in Ahmedabad, Pune, Delhi, which came in next to a very huge institution or a park or maybe a neighborhood, something like that. Like, so what happened was, they never thought what exactly of that neighborhood. Like in case of Gulbai Tekra, you might have seen or heard about that in Ahmedabad. Now that neighborhood is also known as Hollywood Vasti, as they call it. But that entire neighborhood is not used to a mechanism of a bus first, and then of a BRT, and then you put in cycle tracks. Now they found, okay, there is a footpath here, which no one is using because they're not designed in particular manner for people to use them. We can put our huts around that, because now we have a good surface below. Like the huts that they had was on broken footpaths or broken low surface area, which is all soil and everything. Now they got a good surface. So now you enabled that activity. And you never knew that this was going to happen, because you didn't even study the economic factor and the social factor of that particular neighborhood before doing your BRTS. But this is where certain projects are highly successful, like the Chandni Chowk redesign of footpath. That was successful because we talked to a lot of people around first, before even doing our first step of design, to understand what is the need of the area. Do they need vehicle access? If they need it, when and how they can provide? Is there a back-end access to it? All of that. Will people make their houses here? There was lesser tendency because there were lesser slums or lower income group staying around, but there were more shops and more warehouses scenario. So there's a possibility of encroachment from that perspective. Then how you remove that or design around that? How you enforce around that? Why was the encroachment happening in first instant if it was supposed to happen? So there's something called as feasibility report. But currently sad, till even now in India, feasibility reports are done just to justify the main aim of the project and not all the other alterations that can bring in a change in that project. Very good feasibility studies can actually showcase you maybe not in the first year, but third year, there could be a push towards having wider footpaths than what we have done. Like one of the scenarios of design flaws, which I now come to the second, is when such projects came in, they said minimum 2 meters of footpath. Now the problem came in, how do you justify that minimum 2 meters? So they said, okay, compound wall, 2 meters from that. Then whatever else is carriageway. But it works, it has to be worked exactly other way around, which now certain projects are taking up. From the median, how many lanes do we require? You design for 2 or 3 lanes, then everything what is left has to go for a footpath, because that is how you develop an edge, because edge has activities, center does not have activities. So there will be more activity on the edge than at the center. Same is with cycle tracks. Like earlier, the definition was minimum 1.5 meters or 1.5 meters, not even minimum to it. So when we say 1.5 meters and there's a tree in the center, what do? You didn't tell us that when you gave us the mandate, right? So now tree comes and the tree park is maybe 1 meters. So you barely have few meters around the tree. You cannot go there. So cyclist now rides on the carriageway. Now that cycle track actually becomes wider footpath. So people walk on cycle track. Footpaths are used by encroachments, sometimes parking also. And then you don't use the design for the way it was purposed to be, right? It was supposed to be footpath and pedestrian, whatever, but it did not work like that. So that is how designs and interactions really sometimes fail if you don't really go forward to it. Like there is one very good example happening in Bangalore currently, which is Gandhi Bazaar redevelopment, wherein they provide space even for vendors, because these were registered official vendors and accounted for exact how much space they require. And thanks to agency like DULT, Directorate of Urban Land Transport, it's a government body who has architects, urban designers and planners with them, who helped support this project. And now this is one of the only examples where vendors were reinstated in their place with a better design and with Teflon fabric. Like usually Teflon fabric is considered so expensive and everything, and they have given that kind of shelter to vendors. So imagine the scale of thinking that has slowly started to change in India to understand how.
But is it temporary?
No, it's a permanent one.
Okay.
It's a permanent one. You can remove it if required in maybe processions or something, but it's a good bolted mechanism which allows for a permanent shade for the vendors, because or else vendors will put whatever like thatched roof or something which looks maybe ugly sometimes, but also it falls randomly in rains also. So this is a little more sturdier as an element. And shopkeepers are also happy because then it doesn't hide their boards and everything, because the vendors are in the front and this is designed in a way. So this is how slowly we are growing onto it. But still there's no one right answer of how not have encroachments, but it's better to envisage how exactly encroachment might happen and project your study in a way that allows to a certain extent of that kind of activity, because if it's needed, then how you provide for it is what another thing. Like people say auto rickshaws encroach our footpaths. That means there's a need of auto rickshaw stand there. If you provide for it, they will not be on your footpath, they'll be in their stand. But because you have not provide for them, they're finding their own way to live around. So it's not a problem of utilization, it's a problem of design and envisaging how things might happen. And if you're a planner, you have to plan for that. If you don't, then that's your problem, not users' problem.
Right. When I was studying architecture, they said that even if you don't design for people, I mean, if you don't give a specific space for people, if they need it, they will take over from your design and they will anyway use it. So it's like that. Yeah. But glad to know where the design fine-tuning needs to be done. I think it's very important point to know for our viewers who would be doing their study or young professionals. I think it will be a great learning for them. But Chetan, we talked a lot about overall policies and very technical stuff. I would like to ask you, you live in Bangalore, which is like burning spot for public transportation or in general transportation issue. How do you manage? What do you do?
So a sad and a happy news from my side, but sad news for others. I have been successful to justify, and maybe I didn't have to also justify too much, but we sold off our last car in the house here in Bangalore. And the reason for that was we were not using it. We didn't need it. And the only reason for that was, again, coming back to ASI, avoid, shift and improve, right? We avoided the need to use private transport at all. We shifted to a place which is very close by to Met. So now, my wife, who actually doesn't know how to ride but was always happy to be behind on a two-wheeler or in a car, but now is very used to using metro. For the first time, she has not used public transport before. She was using for some time in Pune, but now she's so happy to use metro that she's also okay of leaving away that car. And my mom was being dependent on that for very long. But earlier in Mumbai, she used to use public transport, but here there was no good possibility of last mile problem. So she was highly dependent on it. But she also got convinced to a very large extent, which she also said, okay, let's lose our car. Because we use, like, obviously we need to go sometimes to certain places, but then we can always use share auto or even a bus or even cabs for that matter. If we are like 4 people going somewhere, we book a cab. That's also fine. But that's once in a while. Like imagine if we were supposed to use it on daily basis, the maintenance of it, all of that, and slowly themselves did the math and they said, oh, this is just useless, spending money and wasting our resources and getting frustrated all in one go. Rather, like, there was a case when I had to drop my wife to the airport, which is almost 30 kilometers from my place. And I took her in car, came back, and she was like, this was so risky. Like, firstly, at every signal or whatever we had to cross, maybe hundreds of signals, you're like, oh, again a crash problem, or someone might come in, something might happen, the frustration, the heat and everything. And now we go by bus and come by bus, and she feels so safe. And like, the driver has to take brunt of all of what's happening around, and we can enjoy our space, spend some time, and actually have much quality time in public transport than driving your own vehicle. So, and I've been lucky, I'll say, to have family like that. And also they see my work around, and it inspires them to understand why the need to shift away from your regular personal mode of transport. But yes, when we go out, like, I think 2 of our families got together and went to some place close to Karnataka, south of Karnataka, wherein we booked one Zoom car, like a rental car. We drove, went there and came back. But that's almost like twice in a year. So see, the reduction of usage of personal vehicle has gone so down that I did not have a need to have it at house. So yeah, that's how I'm making it in Bangalore also. What second most congested city globally? It's not really that congested. You choose your mode of transport correctly.
Well, Chetan, first of all, big applaud to you and your family that are not just preaching, but following what they are preaching. I mean, your family might not be preaching, but you are practicing, right? So that's very commendable. And second thing is that if from your example, if people can learn that it's possible, then I think our half battle is won that way. So that was the end of our first segment of our podcast, where we interact with our guests and we ask all kinds of questions and take their input and point of view. The second segment is called Rapid Vichaar. It's like questions asked, but answers are given so quickly and a little quirky, funny, to keep the mood light. So are you ready? I'm going to shoot some questions at you.
Scared.
Don't be. So let me start now. India is developing left, right, center, like I said. Industrialization is happening. Infrastructure is getting built very, very rapidly. According to you, what are the major side effects on environment and otherwise of this progress or process or thing?
So the biggest problem of anything that moves fast is you didn't get time to think and plan very well. And India has been moving so rapidly in GDP as well. Like, you cannot put a tab on aspirations, you cannot put a tab on where it will go, which direction it will grow. And hence, a lot of our planning infrastructures or plans have been fading to a very large extent. Like, by the time anything that is planned gets into procedure and gets executed, we have moved a decade further from it. And that's, I think, one of the biggest problems of rapid urbanization. But luckily, India still has been able to leapfrog, learning from the West, who has already struggled through all of these paths. We're not going through the same struggles. Like, India has metro network, buses network, and also good quality of infrastructure of footpaths and streets coming up at a speed of almost 10x to 20x of what Western cities have been able to. And that is where I think we are more successful than they were ever, because we got a heads up from them of their mistakes. So yeah, but that's a big problem.
Yeah, the first part of your answer, I was like, oh no, but the second part of your answer made me feel good. Moving to the next question, some simple and best practices that an individual can adopt, कि वो रोजमर्रा की जिंदगी में ऐसी क्या चीजें adopt कर सकता है to reach from point A to B such that the whole transportation system becomes sustainable.
I think it's less of an individual but more of an institution. But for an individual level, if you really know there's something within 5 kilometers or within 2 kilometers of your house, just try to avoid your personal vehicle to larger extent wherever you can. I'm not talking about monthly groceries. If you're going for monthly groceries, please take anything that can carry the load with you. And let's hope by the end of maybe this decade, you might have good footpaths where you can pull and push your trolleys to carry stuff, which a lot of cases in Berlin or even in Oral Europe people are doing, like even elderly people are doing. Or use your older prams of your children. Just go carry your stuff and carry it back. Hopefully that might happen. But coming back to individual basis, if you can at least twice a week, if you can use public transport for your office, that would be a good start. That would put you in pace and put also sitting space to understand that there is a need, and the rising need will get you better infrastructure.
Great. Next question is, since India is moving so rapidly and India is now very futuristic, we are talking about Viksit Bharat in 2047, 100 years of our independence. If you could invent a futuristic mode of transport, what would it be?
There's a sad answer to this because luckily that mode of transport has been invented, and that is cycle.
Oh no.
So if I could improve something, I would actually improve cycle to the best possibility wherein it would become much easier to cycle around, even with highs and lows. Because I think even for younger kids, it is the first mode of freedom that they get. So if I can get it as soon as possible, the best cycle to the younger kids in our generation in the country, I think that would be the first attempt from my side. Because it was me when I was in third standard or fourth standard when I started cycling, and I could actually explore my bound of area near my house, which was earlier maybe just a half kilometer from the house, but with cycle it expanded to 5 kilometers. Now my parents did not know in half an hour I was actually going to my school and coming back just for fun. Not to attend school, just for fun with kids around, like all the society kids would come together, we would cycle, go and come around. That's maybe the futuristic idea I'm on.
Yeah, and that became also very handy for mothers who wanted immediately some groceries from the nearby shop.
Yeah, put something on your cycle, just go around, come back. Like you might say like it might take 10 minutes, but actually you do your job in 2 minutes and have your 8 minutes for your freedom to do anything around 8 minutes.
Correct. So next question is, now that you talked about your childhood, what piece of advice you would give your younger self about sustainability and transportation?
If I could have heard my future self to come back to me and the future self going back to my younger self, I would go and tell, believe in yourself and don't ever listen to someone who says their private mode of transport is more fancier than your own cycle or public transport. Always believe that whatever you choose in the right direction of anything that is sustainable is the right way to go ahead.
Yeah, that's so important, because आज की दुनिया में हम एक दूसरे को देख के jealousy से we always want to do a centimeter extra or go a little extra than the other person. So yeah, it's very important. Competition very high in India. Okay, since you are an architect, and before becoming an architect, we all have this imagination in our thoughts, and of course as an architect also you imagine spaces, etc, etc. So I would like to ask your designer insight that if you had to design an eco-friendly mode of transportation, what one wacky feature would it have and what would you name it?
So I don't know it's possible ever though, but I would want anything, at least because we are in temperate zone, to have any mode of transport to be really good air conditioned, like in a way. And a very wacky term, I would call it like cool vibe. Like anything that is cool is very cool in India. So currently cycling is again taking that cool vibe, but it's really hot in our cities to cycle around. If only there was an invention that would make me really cool and feel breezy out there without any trouble, I would make that happen. And that could be in bike also as well, but cycle is more eco-friendly that way. But the bigger thing is that could actually make me and a lot of other people also to choose this over anything else. Like even like elderly people also don't like it being hot and sweaty out there. So why would we choose such a mode? So maybe, yeah, cool white, that will be good.
Nice. Okay, and last question from the slot of Rapid Vichar. Since you interact a lot with people, what is that one thing or one incident that you had has left a mark on you?
Yeah, actually, it's in a funny incident also and a little serious one back then. So I was working with one of the engineers, city engineers for their project. They are funding it. They are doing it. But I being consultant or a designer on the other end, or even WRF for that matter, I was adamantly fighting for the thing to be right. And then he got me to my shoes and put me down saying like, look, whatever you're doing is because we are paying it to happen. So the choice is mine. You can try hard to convince me, but you cannot push me to do something that I don't want to do. And that put me into a place where I realized, yes, that's my job. My job is not to force him to do something that might not be existent or might not be needed, but to convince him what I'm doing is the right way to do it. And that is when I started learning the skill of changing tone, change in pauses, change in how you really modulate yourself to make the other person understand why this is important. And if that is not the role of any architect, urban designer, or urban planner, or even any engineer, then there is no other role. You have to play a role of not just designing, but convincing people that if that is the right thing, okay, you don't have to convince everything that you feel is right, but if you feel it's really the right thing to do, then develop skill to showcase that this is really important, this is why it is important, and actually prove it around. And just beyond that, after a few years, this person comes back to me and tells, like, I know I fought with you that day, but your instinct was so right. But the only thing is, the way you talk now, you would have talked with me back then. I would have done it that way. So yeah, that was a life-changing experience for me. And he's also very cool, chill, young person that way. But that interaction really helped me to understand what my real better skills can be tomorrow and which were not back then.
Public dealing is the most important key when it comes to convincing, or for that matter, selling any product or any service. Thank you so much, Chetan, for answering our rapid Vichaar questions. Now we move on to our third and last segment, just called Vichaar Chits. So we at Vichaar have created a set of questions which we ask all our guests, and it is also for our audiences to respond to. Since we are doing this online, I would suggest you pick a color and then I'll ask you the question.
I've talked too much about sustainability, so maybe we can go for green.
Nice. Okay. So the question here is, if you had a superpower, one superpower, what would you do? But let me tweak the question here. If you had a superhero power, what would you do to better the transportation system in today's context in India?
Hey, that's something that I think I'm trying to do even now, but I would like a Thanos click with me. Like, he's a villain though, but I would like the Thanos click with me to make everyone understand the need of sustainability and sustainable transport, and not vanish them, but make them champions in their own cities and neighborhoods. Fight for it to the feeling that they feel is right in their neighborhood. If that could happen, I would just want that, because then I could relax down in my own city and chit chat with any regular person and share the same feeling of urge to make something happen or change in my own city. I think, yeah, that's the superpower I would want, the click of Thanos.
How wonderful. And we wish that with your people convincing power and with your affection, with your conviction, the work that you are doing, we wish you all the very best. And we hope and wish that this journey just goes higher and higher and higher for you, and you do amazing work for making our cities very effective in sustainable transport. Thank you very much, Chetan, for doing this episode with us, and I had thoroughly enjoyed. I've learned a lot of things. Thank you so much.
I would rather say thank you for having me here, because I never felt I've done something good, but I feel that you are really doing this really good job of making these messages from individuals going out there, because we are like thrived and charged about things, but you are making everyone charged about it. I think thanks for Vichaar Wise for this entire conversational little podcast, that series, whatever you're doing. It's amazing. And thank you for having me there. Really happy to be part of this journey.
Thank you so much. That was the conversation with Chetan Sodaye, a warrior, a hero from Bengaluru, who is working for better and sustainable transportation system in our Indian cities. We need more heroes like that. मुझे उनके साथ बात करके बहुत मजा आया, उनकी कहानी सुन के भी बहुत मजा आया. I hope कि ये एपिसोड भी आपको बहुत अच्छा लगे. हम हमारे पॉडकास्ट में ऐसा प्रयास करते हैं कि कुछ नया लेके आए आपके लिए. तो इसके साथ ये एपिसोड खत्म होता है, और वेट फॉर द नेक्स्ट एपिसोड. टिल देन, बी गुड. बाय.
Like, share and subscribe to our channel, Vichaar Vibes.